All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to SPM Live. We are back. Today's show, we are going to go over customer service for your restaurant, pizzeria, and basically just customer service in general. Mike and I are going to give you some great tips. I am Bruce Irving. I am your host. My co-host this week is Mike Ganino.
Hello, everybody.
So we're going to do 30-minute show. If you have any questions, if you're watching us live, you can leave them in the chat box there. If you're watching this show or listening to the podcast later on the replay, you can go to smartpizzamarketing.com/SPM live, all one word, and you can find the links for the future shows if you missed this one. And then the description of how we're going to be running the show from here on out. It's going to be 4, 5, 6 shows, maybe tops. In the course of consecutive weeks. We'll take a few weeks off, we'll reschedule, and then have all the next set of shows lined up so we can not just do a show and say, hey, what are we talking about this week? We'll have them all scheduled out and ready to go. So the topics will be relevant and new. And, basically we talk about shows, the questions that we get asked on a weekly and daily basis. So today's show is going to be all about customer service. Mike has some great tips for you. I'm sure he always does. Before I get into today's show, we'll kind of lead it off with like a first take here. Been getting a lot of questions about this Pokemon Go phenomenon that's happening here.
Oh my gosh. I was speaking today. I gave a talk at the International Council of Shopping Centers. They had a big conference here in LA, and I was speaking today, and the joke I made about Pokemon Go got a lot of laughs. So I think everyone's thinking about it.
I think it's a hot topic, obviously. I'm actually going to just snap this out on Snapchat here. And if you're watching over on the blog on smartpizzamarketing.com, you can only watch there. If you want to ask questions or interact with us, you're going to have to use the link right below the video. There's a link to this episode, and then it's going to bring you over to YouTube. And then from there, you can chat and ask us questions or interact with us. But if you're just watching on the blog, all you're going to be able to do is just watch. So we'll take it from there. I've gotten a few questions about what's the play with Pokemon Go? Like what's the play that you can use it in your business? And I mean, I don't use Pokemon Go. I've never used it. So my nephew came over and he slept over for the weekend last weekend, and he was using it the whole time he was here. But I don't know if there necessarily is a play for businesses to use it. I think it might be something that if you have it available in your place, great. If not, I don't really think that you should be focusing on that. I always get questions. Everybody wants to know what's the next best thing. I think that you need to not waste time trying to figure out the next quick thing and focus on what's working for you now and what's working and the things that are tried and true. The reason we talk about Snapchat's been around for a long time. So, and the user base is really large. So it's not like we said Snapchat just came out and we said, hey, hop on this and start using it. It's been out for 4 years already. And the user base is consistently growing. That's why we said you start to learn how to use that. But when it comes to something like Pokemon Go, I'm not exactly sure if there is a business play for you.
So do you think have you seen some of the stuff that people have done with like paying to make their place like a Pokemon gym or a training center where people do show up? Do you think it's just a big stretch to think that those people are going to stay and shop?
I think that, if you go out in public and you see people using Pokemon, they usually they got their head down and they're doing something when it comes to the game on their phone. I don't know if it's going to be necessarily something that's going to, if they come in, that it's going to make a lasting impression with someone that they were in your place. I think it might just be like a pit stop, They seem to be very focused on the game when they're doing the game. I don't know if there's a way for them to come into your restaurant because of the Pokemon, put their phone down, have a dinner, and then go back to the game. I don't know if that's something that's going to be valuable. I mean, you could try it out and it might work for a few minutes, but I don't know how much money I would put behind it.
Yeah, we've seen a bunch here in LA. We've seen a lot of places that have started to do Pokemon happy hours. So from 4 to 6, they have and because they realize that they're really close to, or they've decided to be one of the spots that people stop. But I'm with you. I wonder, I'm also a fan of experimenting and seeing what happens.
Yeah,
but I think it's an interesting thing to think about, paying a little bit of money each hour and seeing what happens. I think that's interesting. I don't know that I would bank my restaurant's future on people chasing Pikachu into my restaurant and then stopping for a margarita for happy hour. I think that's an interesting. I don't know what would happen there. I don't know.
here's my take. If you use Facebook and email and you have it figured out, experiment with Pokemon. But if you don't really know how to use your Facebook page, or you collect emails, but you don't send emails, and you're not really interacting with your customers on social media, then forget Pokemon. Go do that, because those things are going to be around a year from now, and there's no guarantee that Pokemon is. So that's what I think. Like if you have your, if you have 3 or 4 stores or restaurants, or even one really good restaurant, and you have a marketing plan in place and it's chugging along, experiment. But I find the questions coming from people who don't have that in place, and they're just kind of looking for the next quick thing to jump on.
Right. So it's like, ooh, this might be the miracle thing for me.
Right. Exactly. The same people that send me, what do I do with $20 a month on Facebook? Right. Or I placed an ad yesterday and I didn't get anything from it. And you have to give that
an email and nobody bought a package.
Right. Instantly. I sent it. When did you send it out? Oh, I sent it out yesterday. Well, give it a little bit of time. Social media is really about building that awareness. It's like the real estate yard sign. It doesn't do anything, but it builds like the name recognition of the people who drive around constantly. Yeah. Interesting. I think you should do that. Yeah. So I don't know. That's my take on that. People have asked me about that for a while. So that's what I think of the whole Pokemon phenomenon. Now I could be completely wrong. We might be talking about this 6 to 12 months from now. And people have built businesses on it and made tremendous amounts of money. And I'll come back on and be like, I was wrong and you should have done it. And I'm sorry.
Well, and I think that goes to the other thing of like, having a basic understanding of like, I think what you said is important. If you are doing lots of different things, and this is one other option, then absolutely go ahead. But if you don't have the basics in line, then focus there first versus hoping that this does anything, because I think what it'll do is something incremental to what's already going on in your business. So sure, add this incrementally to your other marketing. But, I think it's one of those things. And I know I've been a restaurateur for 20 years. There's something comes out and you think, oh my gosh, if I remember this is how we were when Instagram first started being used by brands. And at Protein Bar, we thought, oh my gosh, this is it. All of our slow periods of the day, we're going to send out a picture of a smoothie and tell people to stop in for like snack time happy hour. And they're all going to come in for smoothies between 2 and 4. And like 4 people liked the picture. And, and even after that, we started getting hundreds and hundreds of likes. And we realized like, oh, so many of these people don't even live nearby. And half of them are like social media gurus who just like each other's stuff. And they're actually not going to be customers of our brand. And so it was fun, but was it the most effective way to like draw right now business?
Right.
Still vote for email marketing in that world.
Yeah, I agree totally. Someone recently commented to me that said, hey, I started to do email. I think it's someone that we've had like watch one of the shows we did about email marketing and he's like, hey, I've started to do emails. I'm like, great. And they're obsessed with open rates. And I said, what's your click rate? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, listen, opens are great, but clicks are better, because when people click on whatever it is you put in your email, those are your customers. Anybody opens, I send out a lot of emails and I get tons of open rates, but the people who are clicking on the link that you put in there are the people that you should be focusing on, because those are actual people who are going to buy or use your service. Everybody can, maybe accidentally open an email or open an email many times, but that doesn't necessarily mean that what you're doing is interesting. It just means you had a catchy headline and, it got opened.
Yep.
So, all right. So the next thing I have to talk about is I have a great podcast for you to listen to. If you're into podcasting and customer service, Lee Cockrell, who was the former executive vice president of the Walt Disney World company in Florida.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, great podcast. Pretty short too, not tremendously long podcast. 20, anywhere from 15 to 20 to 30 minutes long. About how the Disney built their customer. Like Disney is known for having great customer service when it comes to training and onboarding their staff, and he just gives a tremendous amount of insight as to how they do that. And I think that anyone listening or watching this show in the future can learn a lot from how Disney builds, because they have tons and tons and tons of employees. So they have to have great systems and great customer service. And anybody who goes to the parks or the resorts knows that, 99% of the time you go there, you're going to get pretty good customer service. So I think his podcast is called.
The latest episode the latest episode had Bob Berg, who I love and who is in the same like speaking circle. I mean, he's not my friend, so I'm not saying like he's my buddy because he's pretty big deal. But he's the author of the book Go Giver, which is a pretty famous famous book. The last episode had him on it, and they talked about how culture is not wasn't just part of the game, that the culture was the actual game in creating a good customer service thing. So that episode had my heart with the culture talk, of course.
That's all you.
Yeah, I love that one.
And it is a big part of it. It's like the onboarding process and the setting the expectations up front is a great way to build those great employee bases. And, you know, the onboarding process, what questions. We did a whole bunch of episodes about that in the past. We'll link to those in the show notes for this episode. But today's main topic, and I don't want to be here too long. I want to be like, you know, make these episodes really concise, to the point, 30, 40 minutes and be done. So today's podcast episode is about customer service, how to give great customer service and how to give bad customer service and how not to give bad customer service.
I'm not going to teach you that. I promise.
No, we're gonna kind of point out some flaws, but not going to teach you how to give bad customer service, I hope.
Yeah. You know, it goes back to exactly that episode of the Disney Magic. I think that's what the show is called, or Disney Leadership Magic is maybe what the show is called. Which is that it's about creating a culture. It's not about the specific rules or the steps of service or any of that. And I think that's where so many operators spend a lot of time, is they think if we get all the mechanics right, if we tell you exactly what to do all the time, then we'll have great service. And that's just not the reality. The reality is that you need to create a culture of great service. You need to create an environment where great service just naturally happens, and then feed it and take care of it. It's kind of like thinking of service as a bit of like a garden. You've got to put the right soil in, you've got to plant the right seeds, and then you've got to take care of them so that they give you good yield. And I think that's really the idea here. So you know, some of the notes I wrote are less about here's exactly the systems you need for great service, because that's going to depend on your location and what your customers want.
Right.
But I do think creating a culture of great service is exactly what everyone should be striving for.
And actually, Lee says that in the podcast. I listened to an episode earlier today. I'm not sure which one it was, but he says he give out like business cards and kind of lay out what the expectation is for customer service. Like, what does a good customer service look like? And what should you say, and give different scenarios of what happens. Like, how do you answer the phone? How do you greet a customer? How do you deal with an issue in the dining room in front of other guests? You know, he's like, the more that you lay out and set those expectations up front, the better equipped your staff will be to handle them when they happen.
For sure. And then it's keeping it. And actually, that was the first. I just wrote a chapter for somebody's book. He's doing a book on marketing and getting seats and butts for bars. And so he said, hey, I want you to write a chapter if you're interested on service, because I think if I sell these people a product that helps them get butts and seats, but they don't give great service, then they're going to waste their money. And I said, that's exactly it. Actually, that's 100% true, which is why we're here today talking about service. And because it is a form of marketing. In fact, it's the best form of marketing. If you're nailing it over and over, you probably aren't going to have to spend a whole lot of money getting new customers. You're going to be able to spend your marketing money on keeping your current customers happy and inviting new folks in. So the very first step in this model that I wrote for this book is creating a really clear vision of what great service looks like for your brand. Because so often we'll start with these business cards, like you mentioned, or something, and we'll say, give really great service. What does that mean? Great service to me might mean something different than it is to you. And quality means something different to you than it does to me. And we've had this talk. I think you and I have talked about these faux trips we were going to go on, and where would you go and where would I go? And yours was to Disney with the family, and mine was to like some amazing city with wine and food. So if we're not clear about what a great experience is, then the team isn't going to understand how to apply the rules later. So the number one step is to really like paint a picture of it. And what I advise when I've worked with clients on customer service design is to really explain it, like literally pretend like Bruce is a dad. Bruce and his kids come in twice a week. When they come in, they have the greatest time because blah, 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 and blah, 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 and really describe their experience. So that way your team knows, oh, that's what I'm trying to recreate.
Right. Yeah, you know, people spend so much time and energy trying to get new customers too, and money. You know, it's much easier to keep the customers you already have with good customer service than it is to go out there and find new ones. I think that that's a problem that most businesses have. You spend 90% of your time marketing to get new customers when you should be spending 90% of the time marketing on the customers you already have.
Yeah, exactly.
And it goes to the,
if you're spending time getting people in and then they come in and they have a bad experience because you haven't spent the work to do this, then it's like, who cares that they came in once? That's like, you're not going to make anything.
Right. And you don't know how many times I'll call, a pizza shop or a restaurant and they answer the phone, the name of the restaurant. It's like, really? Like, that's my first impression of your place is that it should be a much better greeting than that. If I go to a place and they give great customer service and there's an error or a mistake, I'm much more likely to go back to that place than if they weren't very friendly or inviting and then they made a mistake on top of that.
And isn't that just, you could pull that example from your life. When you think about your friends, right? When your friends like, do something wrong at work or have a bad day or something, you listen to their story and you think like, wow, I can't believe that happened to you. Some other stranger, you listen to the story and you think like, well, you deserved, like you must have done something. It's like, there's this thing called the fundamental attribution error where things happen to us because, unlucky circumstances or something like that. And it happens to other people because they deserved it. Right. And the same thing happens with great service. If bad service happens somewhere we love, we think, ooh, must have been an off night. No big deal. But if it happens somewhere we've only been to once, we think that place really sucks. They never get it right.
Right. No, you're absolutely right about that. And then, so that really goes to show that like that first impression means a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not a lot of people train their staff to say, that impression is the most important impression, because like you said, if a place you love to go to has an off night, it's an off night. So because you've built that trust, that track record of good service, good quality over time, through great customer service, that's given you the ability to make that one mistake.
Yeah. And again, I go back to the very first step, all of folks who are watching this and gonna watch this, when you start to think about like, what do I do with my service? The very first thing, more than anything, more than even figuring out the steps of service or any of that, create really clear stories about what it looks like to be a customer there. When something goes wrong, how do you guys handle it? When somebody calls online, how do you handle it? When kids come in, how do you handle it? And write these very specific stories. And I actually learned this from Pixar and Disney. One of the things I do with clients is I'll actually go through and say, let's storyboard exactly all the stages your customer goes through. So they're in your parking lot. What happens in your parking lot? How are the plants? Are the plants clean? What does it look like? As they walk up to the front door, what's going on there? What's in their mind? What are they thinking? And how are you dealing with the emotions you're bringing in? At your host stand or your front counter, what's going on there? What's it look like? How's it feel? And what I often find is when we go through these activities, we're able to identify like, there's like 5 or 6 things we're doing right now that don't match up with the experience we want them to have. And then we know, okay, great, let's clean that up and we could do the work. So the first step really is creating a very clear vision of what great service means for your crew.
And do you think that they should like reenact that in person, like give some scenarios and like role play kind of?
Yeah, I think, if the first step is to create a really clear, compelling vision so that everybody understands exactly what you say. When you say great vacation, you say, oh, it means I'm Disney with my wife and my kids. Kids or kid?
Kids.
Kids, multiple, all the kids.
Yeah. I got 3.
3 kids, okay. And we have a great time, and it means this, and it means this, and we've done this, and it looks like this, and it looks like that. That's what we need to do. And the issue is most of us as leaders haven't done that, and we don't actually know the answer to that. So that's the first step. And before you do anything with anybody, it's getting really clear and creating a vision, writing it down. If you don't want to write it down, record it, and then have somebody else write it down, or say it into Google Docs and have it transcribe it, but get it written down so you could recreate it. Then the second step in this little model I made is to teach it often. And one of the places you teach it is during interviewing. You can practice those role plays during interviewing. You can practice those and tell those stories during orientation. And then during all your initial training, doing role plays like you just said. And one of the things that when I was running a protein bar and homemade pizza company, when I was head of operations there, one of the things that our teams had to do every day was actually go outside with their clipboard and actually walk through the entire experience as a customer so they could see what was missing. And that's how we found dirty windows. That's how we found dead plants. That's how all of those things are cues to your customer about we don't really care that much.
Right. That's a great point there, is that you should really come into your business like an outsider. Don't look at it. Sometimes you have those blinders on when you're doing your daily operations, that you don't see the front door glass dirty, or listen to that person answer the phone and just say one word, not the whole greeting, or make someone, when someone calls, make it feel like, when somebody that calls or comes in, make it feel like you're excited to see them, not annoyed by seeing them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for the most part, like once you've got that vision clear and you're teaching and talking about it often, then people, what I get a lot is people say like, well, my team doesn't do it. And it's like, great, now you have a culture issue. Let's talk about what might be wrong. And what's usually wrong is that we only deal with service when something goes wrong. We don't talk about it during pre-shift. We don't tell stories. One of my favorite examples of this is the Ritz-Carlton. So Ritz-Carlton, in my third step, by the way, is, so we have a vision, teach it often, and the third step is practice daily. And one of my examples there is the Ritz-Carlton, who every day at every single property across the world, they have the same exact service notes that they review. So they're doing it from Australia to New York City to Japan and Europe. They have the same notes every single day. The entire company is talking about the same service stuff every single day in their pre-shift meetings. And so when people come to me and they say like, oh, my team isn't answering the phone nicely. Great, now we have a culture issue. The number one issue usually with the culture stuff is that the leader is inconsistent. That we're not talking about it every day, that we're not doing it in pre-shifts, that we're not sharing all the feedback as frequently as we can. And typically we write memos when things are going bad. So like in your case, somebody would take a piece of paper and say, would write a memo, we must answer the phone this way because we love good service. That's not really the way performance happens, though. That's kind of anti the way people work.
Right. So you have to set that precedent beforehand. Say, hey, listen, this is how we answer the phone here in this company. We do it every time, often. And then there's got to be a check and balance place. We have to like make sure that they're doing it the right way, and then make sure that you have a system for finding out if they are or not, and then following up if they're not. And
if they are. In both cases, following up, because we tend to do what we get applauded for. Like, how old is your youngest child?
9.
9. Okay. So when your 9-year-old was first learning to walk, I imagine that when 9-year-old Abe was able to walk, there was claps, there was cheers, there was yay, all those moments, right?
Yep.
That's encouraging. And so to think that like all of a sudden we become 18-year-olds and then that changes, that's not true. That's the same thing that drives this, is understanding, ooh, this is what you're looking for. So what I see so often is that people jump on their staff when they don't do it right. And yet they don't spend enough time telling them when they're nailing it, which is probably even more important.
Right. And why is that? Is that just because they just expect them to do it that way? So it just kind of like goes unsaid?
Yeah, I think it's as leaders, especially in the restaurant industry. So many of us are frontline leaders who've been promoted. So something like 7 or 8 out of 10 restaurant owners started as entry-level folks. And that was certainly my case. I was a dishwasher at Pizza Hut, and then finally a partner and chief operating officer in my brand. And unless somewhere along the way you took the time to really think about leadership, to read books, to ask questions, to be self-aware, then you never got those little notes that say, hey, here's why you should do it. And that thing I was talking about earlier, that fundamental attribution error, which we can call the blame bias, says that like, ooh, on the days where I don't give a great performance as a manager, it's because I'm tired or my staff sucks or I'm angry or my bills are piling up. But when you don't give good performance, it's because you just suck. And that's the thing. And so we don't think about that, like, oh, I wonder what's going on. And so I just think along the way, we're in that fight or flight mechanism. And so it's easier to notice what's wrong than to say what's right. And I know that there's probably folks out there who are listening and saying, well, I pay them to answer the phone properly. Right. My question would be like, great, how's that working for you?
Right.
It's just not the way it works.
No, because money only goes so far. Like money is only a certain small portion of motivation. Money is always a short-term motivation. Like if someone's upset and they want a raise, and great, you give them a raise, they're only going to be happy for a short period of time until whatever that fundamental reason is of why they were unhappy comes back again.
Right. And it's like sports. You're a sports guy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So imagine it's basketball, and imagine you're the coach of the basketball team. Do you only tell the players when they've done something wrong? Like, here's how you don't shoot a three-point.
No, of course not. You do the complete opposite.
Right. You practice doing it right. So the issue is that we practice to not do it wrong versus practicing doing it right.
And you celebrate the wins. You don't celebrate the losses.
Right. And so what happens often is we don't celebrate the wins at all. And we just talk about when the wrongs suck. And so now it's hard for your team to know, well, what do you really want from me? Because I just know what not to do. And that also teaches them to just not do it when you're there. Right. Which is where some people then go home and then they know, like, wait a second, I'm getting all these complaints when I've left for the night that my staff isn't doing it. You've got a culture issue, not a service issue.
They're performing one way when you're around and then one way when you're not.
Right. It's inconsistent.
Right.
Yep.
Another thing that I noticed that a lot of people do, especially since I'm in the marketing social media world, is I see places, businesses, it could be any type of business. You know, this is a show that we talk about the restaurant industry a lot, but the fundamentals that we talk about can be used in any business. And I see a lot of people pushing out content on social media and then their customers responding, good or bad, and then they don't respond back.
Why should we're going to ignore them?
I know it so annoys me so bad when I see, because whether it be on Yelp or on Facebook or on Twitter, like someone reaches out, like you're putting out content, you're on those platforms for a reason. You're putting out content. Obviously you want the people on the other end to be aware of what you're doing and see it. And then they respond, whether that be good or bad, and then you don't say anything.
Right.
Like, don't even acknowledge that they said something. And I see that happen so much, and I don't know why people are doing that. Like, I don't even know why they're even bothering putting stuff out if you're just going to kind of ignore it. Is it laziness? Is it they don't know what to say? I'm confused as to why people do that.
I mean, I would say it's two things. One, it's not having an actual system down.
Right.
And saying, here's the way to get it all done. Here's how you make that consistent. Two, they have it, which means also that they haven't included in their normal flow of work. So as restaurant people, we love checklists, right? We love like our daily checklist, our open checklist, our closed checklist. So there should definitely be a management checklist. And in the video series I just shot for Tipsy, which does videos for hospitality industry, I did a whole 20 videos on how to be a first-time manager. One of the things in those videos that I talked about was you've got to build the things you need to do into your regular flow. So like if you don't put social media time on your calendar, then you're not going to do it.
Right.
And then you remember, you see Bruce talking somewhere and he says like, oh, you should be doing social. So you're like, oh yeah, I've got to do it. And you jump on and you tweet something out and then you disappear again because it's not part of your system.
And I don't think you should be, and I'm not saying you should have to respond immediately. Like obviously the faster, the better, but I'm talking about, I see, customer inquiries or comments that are like 2, 3, 4 weeks old. Like that's a lot. That's enough. Like we should be, you should check it once a day, once every other day at a minimum. Yeah. And just comment, even if it's just like a thumbs up or like you'll see often people comment on my social and it's like, I don't give a huge response back because sometimes it's just giving them the acknowledgement that I saw it and I read it, and just give them a thumbs up or a smiley face, or it doesn't have to be this huge amount of text that takes forever for you to do. Yeah. It's like someone walking into your restaurant and you're at the front door and they're like, hey, that was like the best dinner of my life. And you stare them in the face and don't say anything.
Walk away.
It would be so awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the same too, when we're talking about this, like this idea of creating a culture of great service. I mean, that's the last step, is reviewing it. And so that's looking at your social media accounts. It's looking and saying, what are people saying? What can I learn? Are there trends? Are those kinds of things going on? And so if you're not looking at those things, you're not taking part of the conversation is happening, whether you want to be there or not.
Right.
So you might as well have some say in it.
Yeah. And I think far too often people try to respond to the negative comments and like defend themselves instead of just saying, hey, you know what? I'm sorry. It happened.
Or to move it offline right away.
Exactly. Like I was going to say, like the public forum is not a place for you to defend yourself. It should just be like, hey, I'm sorry. What's your email? I'm going to send you a quick email and we can or a phone call and talk about what happened. And I want to solve the problem. That's going to go much further for you in your presence online than any other thing.
And I think outside of there being some like crazy thing that might've happened, I actually think handling it all publicly is great.
Right.
What a great turnaround if that's the case. I mean, obviously, unless there's something involving an employee, something that you need to take offline. But not every single, that's too much. A lot of brands that I see, the first thing they do is you write in a message and you say, hey, my lunch was screwed up. And they say, great, email us here and we'll talk to you.
Right.
Oh, I wrote you here. That's like saying somebody calls you at your restaurant and says, hey, I want to talk to you, but I got the wrong burrito at lunch. And you say, okay, no problem. Mail us a letter and we'll talk. No, I called you. That's how I want to be treated as a customer. So, I think that this is getting more and more outrageous because this is how people deal. They don't deal with, I want to call you, I want to email you. I'm reaching out to you on my cell phone the way that I want to.
Right.
And I think it's our job as service providers to be ready to handle it that way. And so this immediate thing of like, I'm going to take it offline and deal with it online and save the day and become a hero in front of everybody.
Yeah, because people will see that too. They'll see how you responded to that. I was talking more about if it's going in a bad direction.
Yeah, of course. Or if it involves a specific employee that they want to name, well, get it offline then.
Like you can tell if someone's going to be receptive to, and usually if you're in the hospitality industry, the first email or call or whatever it is from a customer is really bad. And then if you can just say, hey, sorry about that, we made a mistake. Generally, when they respond to that, it's usually like, oh, you know what? Sorry, I was just having a bad day. I appreciate your response. Sorry, it wasn't as bad as I made it sound. I was just angry at the time. Usually their first initial reaction is really vicious. And then if you just say sorry, then when they come back again, it's usually not as bad as they initially thought it was.
Right. Well, it's like, the people pop in and all they want to do is I'm angry and mad and I want to tell the world. And then as soon as you answer with like a human response, it's like, oh crap, there's people there. Let me soften my approach. We used to do that all the time. My grandma and I worked with my grandma at Pizza Hut when I was in high school. She was the manager and I did the dishes. I got her the job. I worked there for washer. And then I eventually became a server and a trainer and on and on. But people would call and they would yell at her on the phone, like, you screwed up my pizza. I went at the manager and she was the general manager and she would say, okay, no problem. Hold a moment. And then she would just give it to me. And then they were like, oh, thank you so much for taking a moment to listen to me. But they were like screaming and cussing her out. But as soon as they got to me, it was like, oh, someone's listening. So, okay, I'll soften my approach.
Right. Sometimes the first person they talk to is not the person they want to end talking to.
Right.
I think you said a good point there. You said a human response. And I know many times you see someone leave a comment or something, and they're like, hey, this is, I had a bad experience. Like, so sorry about that. The blank team. Like, don't do that. Like, say your name. Like, if your name's Bob and you responded, say, hey, man, sorry. This is Bob. I'm the so-and-so here. I want to make it right. This is what I'm going to do for you. Like, make it personal and make it from one person, not from like your business.
Yeah. We used to do that in a protein bar. We would, in the profile at the time, it was me and my partner and then our director of marketing, Annalisa. So it said like Mike, Matt, and Annalisa tweeting. And then at the end, we would put like our initials of like who was talking to that person.
I think that's a great way. I think that's a great way to get people to interact. And then the more that they see the same person doing it over and over again, they're going to get to know them. They're going to, pretty soon, if you do that consistently, they're going to be like, hey, is Bob there?
Right.
I want to talk to him about something.
Right.
And then just get used to saying that one person. So it's a great way to build a humanness to your business.
Yeah. And I think the other thing on service, we talked about creating a vision, teaching it often, practicing it every day, rewarding it with your team. Is also then reviewing it, like I was saying, and really figuring out how are you going to measure it over time, because we often measure it just by sales, which is a measurement of it, but there's other things to measure. And so getting clear on like what you're going to measure and how you're going to do that over time, because the other thing that happens, especially in this industry or the retail industry, and really anywhere with a high customer support, is that we live on this roller coaster of today was a bad day, so everything sucks and we need to fix everything, and then tomorrow nobody said anything, so we're fine again. And so neither of those is probably true. Neither side of that is probably true. And so the issue becomes, if we don't get good at reviewing it and putting some like science behind the way we're going to measure and track service, then we live on this roller coaster, which is frankly unhealthy as an owner. And it also drives you to do really harmful things to your brand, because you overcorrect, you overreact with your team. And so the final step in my little process is to figure out ways you're going to review it, and then setting some kind of consistent way to do that over time, so you don't end up on that roller coaster.
So is that like a weekly or daily thing?
I think daily is probably too like in the moment, I think, but I would say some kind of weekly number. A lot of people use secret shopper programs. A lot of people use customer feedback. I think if you're using, I think there's an interesting play out there for people using their mobile app to create something like Uber or Lyft or Postmates does, where at the end you get to score it right away.
Yeah.
You get to say it was a 5. I think there's something really interesting that needs to happen in the mobile app world for restaurants, where it isn't some long survey you have to complete, but it's simply like a 1 through 5 rating after you visited or paid. I think there's something there that can give people data. So I think try to figure out what are some ways you could actually measure service, and then look at that. We measured at Protein Bar, we measured customer feedback via emails on a monthly basis. We looked at the app data, where people would be able to send in reviews from the mobile app when they would pay. And then we also looked at service times, because what we knew is that in the fast casual world, if it was long, then people were unhappy. That was the strongest correlation we had to bad service. And so we would look at our make times, from the time a ticket hit the kitchen to the time it was like bumped off the screen. And so we would look at those daily and weekly and measure those over time. And so, it gave us a chance to kind of look at that without that roller coaster of today was a bad day because we got 10 tweets.
Right.
Which might be true, but
here's a for the pizza industry world, and this is what I tell people to do. How about just sending an email that says, "Hey, this is John. I own the place. How was your order yesterday?"
Yeah.
It could just be as simple as that. Reply with your answer. It does 2 things. It gets them to open your email, and it gets you to have that personal interaction with your customers. And especially with this online ordering thing, is not going to be getting smaller. It's just going to be growing more. So if you're at 20% of online orders, a year from now, you're going to be at 40%. If you're at 40% now, a year from now, you're going to be at 60%, because of what Mike said. People use their phone as their way of communication. They don't want to like if you call me, I'm going to be pissed off. Like, I don't want you to call me. Text me or email me. Like, I don't want that interruption of my day without my permission. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a text is something that I can read when I want, or an email. So if someone calls for you and they order online from you, send them an email the very next day, or write a couple hours later and say, "Hey, this is whoever. How was it?" I guarantee you that's going to build a great rapport with your customers, and then they'll get used to being able to just communicate whether it was good or bad, and that'll be your feedback rather than you having to like spy on your staff all day.
It's kind of it's the virtual version of a table touch. And that's one of the things, like in this chapter that I wrote for this book, I was talking about reviewing service and using table touches. Most people do table touches by walking up and saying, "Was everything okay?" And it's like, do you want it to just be okay? Like, is that what you're aiming for, is just okay? Versus asking specific questions.
Yeah.
I saw that you ordered our new special pizza. What did you think of it? Did you love those flavors? What did you like? I saw that you got one of our, wines or something like that. Being specific, and then it's like, oh wait, you're asking a specific question. The issue is that when I've trained managers before on table touches, they're like, no one really ever says anything. And I say, oh, what are you asking? And what they usually ask is, how's everything tasting?
Right.
Versus a specific question of like, ooh, I saw you ordered our new bacon burger. What did you think of that? Should we keep it on the menu? Was it delicious? Was it your favorite? Like, that's good stuff. So figure out how to do that virtually, and it's a win.
Yeah. And it's the same thing like when you're training a new hire, like the first day, like, okay, you train them, they were there for 3 or 4 hours, then the staff's over, you go up to them and be like, "So what do you think?"
Yeah. Worse.
And they're like, yeah.
And
they're
so,
like, go ahead.
And a lot of people just are like, I don't know what to say. Here's what you say. By the way, I'm giving it to you right now. This is what you say. You ask 2 questions. What did you like best about your performance and working today? And what do you want to do tomorrow to be even more effective? And then you give them the same feedback. Here's what I like best about what you did and how you performed. Here's what I think could make you even more effective tomorrow.
Right.
Every single day.
Right. Because the generic questions, like whether it's being sales or customer service or training, they don't get the response they get the response you're looking for, which is like a non-really determining response. It's just a basic response of, "What do you think?" It was okay. I like it. Okay, great. Like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, how was your dinner? It was okay. Like, you didn't, they got 5 different things and nobody had anything special to say about what they got.
Right. You got bigger issues then.
Right.
And this whole idea of creating a culture of great service, where you're not just trying to get great service done once or twice, but you're creating an environment where great service happens all the time. I think with your team, you even need to do that with feedback. If you're going to go to them and say like, "Hey, great job at table number 8, that's not good enough because I don't know what you want me to repeat." versus saying, hey, great job at number 8. Bruce is a regular. He comes in all the time with his wife and his kids. Thanks for really taking care of them. Thanks for pointing out to me that they tried our new special so I could go talk to them. And I love that you kept the kids occupied with the coloring. That's exactly what we want. Now Perfect. I know what you want me to repeat. But the issue is we don't take the time to do that as managers, and then we're surprised when people don't do what we want them to do. It's because they don't know what to do.
So the whole thing about this podcast episode is about being specific, like really get specific about what you want the outcome to be, what you want your staff to say and act like, and then what your expectations are for your staff to handle your customers.
Yeah. And then how you're going to track the success of that over time.
Right.
Yeah.
You're going to say, what do you think?
Oh gosh. What do you think?
All right. So recap your 3 things, Mike, that you went over real quick, and then we'll end this episode here.
Yeah, so the 3 things were: first, have a really clear, compelling vision for what great service looked like in detail, spelled out so that it's almost like we're watching a movie about great service. Number 2 is teach it often and practice it daily. Teach your team during interviewing, during onboarding, during training, and then practice it every day in your pre-shift and your post-shift. And then the last one is to review it and reward it. Reward your staff when you see it, and review with frequency how you're doing on your service.
Awesome. So Pokemon Go is a no for me. What about you, Mike?
I think it's fun to watch people play it, but I'm not going to spend any money in my business yet.
Okay, go check out the Lee Cockrell podcast if you're looking for customer service tips and techniques from the former executive vice president of Walt Disney World Company. Really great short podcast. And replay of this podcast episode will be out later in the week. You can check it out next week's episode on smartpizzamarketing.com/SPM live. And Mike, where can they find you?
You can find me at MikeGanino.com, everywhere, Mike Ganino, everything. If you can't remember any of that, you can just go to mike.tips. And if you've ever joined that, you've got my email, and you could say, hey, and tell me what you need help with. Excellent. All the links and all that stuff will be in the show notes for this episode coming out later in the week. All right. Thank you so much, Mike. See you later. I should stop broadcast.